Anthony Collins had spent 4 years believing she was gone forever. He had convinced himself that Claire Bennett had made her choice, that she had walked away without looking back, leaving him to raise their daughter alone. He had buried the anger, silenced the questions, and built a life without her. But then she appeared. Standing just a few feet away, her dark eyes filled with something he couldn't yet name, Claire looked at him as if she had never left. As if she had every right to be here. As if time hadn't turned her into a ghost. Anthony's grip tightened around his daughter's small hand. She wasn't supposed to be here. And yet, she was. And for the first time in years, he had no idea what to do next. Anthony Collins lived his life with precision. Every hour of his day was scheduled, every decision calculated, every aspect of his world carefully controlled. It had been that way for years, ever since he had built his empire from the ground up, turning his name into one that commanded power and respect. He was ruthless in business, disciplined in his personal life, and completely untouchable when it came to emotions. Except for her. Except for Lily. His 4-year-old daughter was the only part of his life that didn't follow a strict plan, the only thing that had ever truly mattered outside of his work. He had raised her alone, given her everything he could, ensured that she never lacked love or stability. He had done everything to make sure she never felt the absence of the one person who had walked away. Claire Bennett. The name still lingered in the back of his mind, though he never allowed himself to dwell on it for long. She had left without a word, disappearing from their lives as if she had never existed. No explanations, no messages, no trace of where she had gone. Just gone. For years, he had convinced himself that it didn't matter. That Lily didn't need a mother who had abandoned her. That he was enough. That whatever reasons Claire had for leaving were irrelevant. But all of that changed in an instant. He had just stepped out of his office, holding Lily's small hand as they made their way toward the car. It was just another evening, another routine, nothing out of the ordinary. The city buzzed around them, people moving quickly through the streets, lost in their own lives. Then he felt it. A presence. A pair of eyes watching him, watching them. His instincts, honed over years of navigating high-stakes business and ruthless negotiations, immediately went on alert. His grip on Lily's hand tightened slightly as he turned his head, scanning the crowded sidewalk. And then he saw her. Claire stood a few feet away, frozen in place, her dark brown eyes locked onto his. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt, the city noise fading into the background. Time had changed her, her face was thinner, her features sharper, her hair slightly shorter than he remembered. But it was her, the woman he had once loved. The woman who had disappeared. The woman he had sworn never to think about again. Lily tugged at his hand, looking up at him in confusion. "Daddy? Who's that?" He opened his mouth, but no words came. Claire took a hesitant step forward, her lips parting as if to say something, but nothing came out. Her eyes flickered to Lily, and something in her expression cracked, a raw, unguarded emotion passing through her face. Anthony felt something dark and heavy settle in his chest, a mix of anger, shock, and something else he couldn't quite name. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to exist in his world anymore. And yet, here she was, standing right in front of them, as if she had never left at all. Anthony couldn't move. His mind, usually sharp and calculated, felt sluggish, struggling to process what was happening. Claire Bennett, the woman who had vanished without a trace, was standing before him as if the past 4 years had never happened. His pulse pounded in his ears, a mix of anger, confusion, and something he refused to name tightening in his chest. Lily shifted beside him, her small fingers curling around his hand. She looked up at him, her bright blue eyes filled with curiosity, waiting for him to explain. He had never spoken about Claire, had never given Lily a name to associate with the mother she had never known. He had convinced himself it was better that way, that the absence wouldn't feel so heavy if it remained undefined. But now, that absence stood just a few feet away, staring back at him with wide, uncertain eyes. Claire took a hesitant step forward. Her hands trembled slightly, and for the first time since he had met her, she looked nervous. The Claire he remembered had always been bold, fiery, unafraid to challenge him, unafraid of anything. But this version of her seemed different, like she was holding herself together by sheer force of will. "Anthony," she finally said, her voice quiet, almost unsure. "I." He took a step back, instinct taking over. "Don't." His tone was sharp, colder than he intended, but he couldn't stop it. Claire flinched, but she didn't look away. "Please," she whispered, her gaze flickering to Lily. "I just need a moment." A moment. She wanted a moment. Anthony let out a slow breath, his grip tightening on Lily's hand. His entire body was wound so tight he felt like he might snap. For years. For years of silence, of questions that had gone unanswered, of convincing himself that she had never mattered. And now she wanted a moment. Lily tugged at his hand again, her small voice cutting through the tension. "Daddy?" Claire inhaled sharply at the word, her lips parting, and for the first time, Anthony saw the full weight of emotion in her eyes. Regret. Pain. Longing. She looked at Lily the way someone looked at something they had lost but never stopped loving. And that was when it hit him. Lily didn't know. She had no idea who this woman was, no idea why her father was standing so rigidly, why the woman in front of them looked like she was about to break. She didn't know that the stranger standing there was the reason she had grown up with only one parent. Anthony forced himself to breathe. He could walk away. He could turn his back and leave Claire standing there, let her deal with the weight of her own decisions. He had done it before, had built his life without her, had made sure that Lily never felt like she was missing anything. But now, standing in the middle of a crowded sidewalk with his daughter beside him and his past staring him in the face, he realized he needed answers. He met Claire's gaze, his jaw tight. "Not here." Her shoulders sagged slightly, as if she had been holding her breath, waiting for his decision. She nodded quickly. "Okay." Anthony glanced down at Lily. "We're going home." Lily blinked. "Is she coming too?" Anthony hesitated for only a second before answering. "Yes." Claire sucked in a sharp breath, and for the briefest moment, he saw something flicker across her face, relief, fear, hope. He didn't care which it was. All that mattered now was getting the truth. The drive home was silent, but the air inside the car was thick with unspoken tension. Anthony kept his eyes on the road, gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary, his mind a storm of thoughts he couldn't seem to silence. Claire sat in the passenger seat, hands folded in her lap, her body tense as if she were bracing herself for whatever was coming. Lily, strapped in the back seat, was the only one unaffected by the weight of the situation. She hummed softly to herself, looking out the window, unaware that the woman beside her was the mother she had never known. Anthony's grip tightened. That fact alone made his stomach churn. The house felt too big, too quiet when they stepped inside. Claire hesitated in the doorway, her brown eyes scanning the space like she was stepping into a world that no longer belonged to her. Anthony watched her carefully, noting the way her breath hitched when her gaze landed on the framed photographs of Lily scattered throughout the living room. For years. She had missed 4 years of their daughter's life. And now she was standing in the middle of the home they had built without her, as if she had the right to be here. "Sit," Anthony said, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. Claire moved toward the couch, but her eyes flickered toward Lily, who was already making herself comfortable on the floor with her toys. There was something raw in Claire's expression, something close to desperation, but she held back, sitting stiffly at the edge of the couch as if she were afraid to relax. Anthony didn't sit. He remained standing, arms crossed, watching her like a man assessing a threat. "Start talking," he said, his tone sharper than he intended, but he didn't care. Claire swallowed hard, gripping her hands together tightly in her lap. I know you're angry. Anthony let out a short, humorless laugh. Angry? No, Claire. Angry was years ago. I'm way past that. She flinched but nodded. I understand. No, you don't, he snapped. You don't understand anything, because if you did, you never would have walked away in the first place. Claire's breath shook, but she didn't look away. I didn't have a choice. Anthony's jaw tightened. You always had a choice. She closed her eyes briefly, as if steadying herself, before opening them again. I left to protect her. To protect you. His patience snapped. Protect us from what, Claire? Her fingers curled into fists, and for the first time, her voice rose. From the people who were threatening me. From the people who told me if I stayed, you'd both be in danger. I didn't just leave, Anthony. I ran. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. Threats. Danger. None of this had ever crossed his mind. He had assumed she left because she didn't want to stay, because she had realized she wasn't cut out for this life. But now, she was sitting in front of him, telling him a completely different story. His voice was quieter when he spoke. Explain. Claire exhaled slowly, her body visibly trembling. After I got pregnant, I started noticing things. Strange people watching me, phone calls that would go silent when I answered. I didn't think much of it at first, but then the messages started coming. At first, they were vague warnings, but then they became threats. They knew everything, Anthony. Where I lived. Where I went. That I was with you. Anthony clenched his jaw. His company had always been a target for competitors, but this wasn't business. This was personal. Claire's voice wavered. They said that if I stayed, you'd pay the price. That you would never see it coming. He felt something dark and dangerous coil inside him. And you never thought to tell me? Her eyes filled with something close to guilt. I was scared. I didn't know who to trust. I thought if I left, if I disappeared, they'd leave you alone. Anthony inhaled deeply, trying to steady himself. And did they? Claire hesitated, then nodded. For a while, yes. I changed my name, moved across the country. I kept my distance. But then, last month, the messages started again. His entire body tensed. So you came back. I had no choice, she admitted. I couldn't keep running. I couldn't stay away from her anymore. Anthony turned his gaze toward Lily, who was still playing, completely unaware of the weight of the conversation happening just a few feet away. His daughter. Their daughter. She had been kept from him because of a threat he had never even known existed. When he finally looked back at Claire, his voice was like steel. Do you have proof? She reached into her bag, pulling out a stack of old letters, some of them creased and worn, others more recent, the ink still bold. She handed them to him, her hands shaking slightly. Anthony took them, flipping through the pages. The threats were real. The details were chilling. For the first time, his anger wavered. For the first time, he realized that maybe Claire hadn't just abandoned them. Maybe she had sacrificed everything to keep them safe. He let out a slow breath, forcing himself to look at her again. Why didn't you come to me sooner? Claire swallowed hard. Because I didn't know if you'd ever forgive me. Anthony was silent. Forgiveness wasn't something he gave easily. But now, as he looked at her, at the woman who had carried this weight alone for 4 years, at the mother of his child, at the person who had once meant everything to him, he realized that maybe it wasn't about forgiveness. Maybe it was about what happened next. Anthony sat in silence, gripping the letters Claire had handed him, his knuckles white from the pressure. The words on the pages blurred as he processed everything she had just told him. The threats, the fear, the reason she had disappeared, All of it contradicted the story he had believed for 4 years. He had thought she had walked away by choice, that she had abandoned their daughter without looking back. Now, he was faced with the unsettling truth that she had left to protect them, carrying a burden he never even knew existed. Claire sat stiffly across from him, her hands tightly clasped in her lap. Her body was tense, as if bracing for his reaction, waiting to see if he would believe her or cast her aside. She looked exhausted, not just physically, but in a way that came from carrying too much for too long. He forced himself to take a slow breath, trying to suppress the emotions warring inside him. "You should have told me," he finally said, his voice quiet but firm. Claire's eyes flickered with something between regret and sadness. "I know." Anthony clenched his jaw, shaking his head slightly. "I could have protected you. I could have kept you both safe." Claire exhaled slowly. "I didn't know that. I didn't know who I could trust. All I knew was that they were watching me, that they knew too much. And when the messages told me to leave or risk putting you in danger, She trailed off, looking away. "I did what I thought was right at the time." Anthony ran a hand over his face, struggling to process the weight of it all. He had spent years believing she had made the selfish choice. Now he saw that she had made the hardest one. He looked down at Lily, who was still playing, completely unaware of the storm unfolding in the room. His daughter had grown up without knowing her mother, had never even asked about her because he had never given her a reason to. He had been so focused on protecting Lily from the pain of knowing she had been abandoned that he had never considered the possibility that the truth was something different. He looked back at Claire, his expression unreadable. "Why now?" She swallowed hard before answering. "Because they found me again. I thought I was safe, that they had moved on, but last month, I started getting messages again. They knew where I was, and they made it clear they weren't done." Her fingers tightened into fists. "I couldn't run anymore. And I couldn't stay away from her." Something deep inside Anthony twisted. "You should have come to me sooner," he said, his voice harder now, edged with frustration not at her, but at the situation. "I could have handled this." Claire let out a bitter laugh, though there was no humor in it. "And what would you have done, Anthony? You were already running a billion-dollar company, building an empire. Do you really think you would have dropped everything to go into hiding with me?" His expression darkened. "You don't know what I would have done." Claire sighed, rubbing her temples. "You're right. I don't. Because I never gave you the chance." Silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Anthony's mind was already moving 100 miles an hour, calculating, analyzing, trying to piece together a solution. If they had found Claire again, then that meant whoever had threatened her before was still watching, still waiting. The thought made his blood run cold. He straightened his posture, his voice all business now. "Do you still have the recent messages?" Claire nodded, reaching into her bag and pulling out her phone. She hesitated for a moment before handing it to him. "They're all there." Anthony took the device, scrolling through the texts. The words were simple but chilling. "You can't run forever, we know where you are, he won't be able to save you this time." His grip tightened on the phone. He had spent years keeping his personal life separate from his business dealings, making sure that no one had leverage against him. But now, his past had collided with his present, and his daughter's safety was at risk. That was something he would never allow. He looked up at Claire, his blue eyes sharp and focused. "I'm going to fix this." Claire blinked. "Anthony, you can't just." "Watch me," he interrupted, his voice filled with determination. She sighed, shaking her head. "It's not that simple." "Nothing ever is," he said, standing up and pulling out his phone. "But I don't lose." Claire watched him carefully, as if trying to decide whether she should still trust him after all this time. "What are you going to do?" He turned to her, his gaze unwavering. "Find out who's behind this. And make sure they never come near you or Lily again. For the first time since she had walked back into his life, something in Claire's posture relaxed. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Anthony wasn't a man who dealt in uncertainties. He had spent his life eliminating risks, ensuring that he was always in control. And now, the one thing that mattered most, his daughter, was in danger. He wasn't going to let that stand. No matter what it took, he would protect his family. Even if it meant destroying whoever was trying to take them away from him. Anthony wasted no time. The moment Claire handed him her phone, he scanned the messages again, his mind already moving through possibilities. He had dealt with threats before, competitors trying to gain leverage, business rivals who thought intimidation would make him back down. But this was different. This wasn't about money or power. This was personal. He stepped away from the living room, pulling out his own phone as he walked into his office, shutting the door behind him. His fingers moved quickly as he sent a message to his head of security, instructing them to trace the number that had sent the messages to Claire. He didn't care how long it took, he wanted results. His office, usually a place of control and order, felt different now. His desk, covered in reports and investment portfolios, seemed meaningless in the face of what he was dealing with. For the first time in years, business wasn't his priority. Lily was. Claire was. He stared down at Claire's phone again, the words on the screen filling him with an anger he hadn't felt in a long time. Someone had been watching her, threatening her, forcing her to live in fear. Someone had taken away his ability to protect his daughter for 4 years without him even knowing. That was something he could never forgive. A knock at the door broke through his thoughts. He turned to see Claire standing in the doorway, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "I know that look," she said softly. "You're already planning your next move." Anthony leaned back against his desk, his jaw tight. "Of course I am. Whoever they are, they made a mistake coming after you. And an even bigger mistake threatening Lily." Claire exhaled, stepping into the office. "You can't just throw money at this, Anthony. It's not a business problem." He let out a low, humorless chuckle. "You think I don't know that?" He met her gaze, his blue eyes cold and sharp. "But I have the resources to make sure they never get close to either of you again. And I'm going to use them." She studied him for a long moment before nodding. "What do you need from me?" Her willingness to cooperate surprised him. He had expected resistance, some argument about how she could handle things on her own, but instead, she was giving him control. That meant one of two things: she was either desperate or she still trusted him, at least enough to let him help. "For now, I need details," he said, motioning for her to sit. "Tell me everything you remember about the threats, any faces you recognized, anything that stood out." Claire sat down across from him, tucking a strand of dark brown hair behind her ear. "It started not long after I found out I was pregnant," she admitted. "At first, it was just weird phone calls, silence on the other end, or messages that didn't make sense. Then, after Lily was born, it escalated." Anthony's fingers curled into fists at his sides. "And you never thought to tell me?" Claire's eyes flashed with something between guilt and frustration. "I didn't know who to trust, Anthony. And at the time, I thought leaving was the only way to protect her. I thought if I disappeared, they would stop. But they didn't," he said flatly. Claire shook her head. "No. It slowed down for a while, but recently, they started again. I don't know why, I don't know what they want. But I couldn't keep running. And I couldn't keep Lily from you any longer." Anthony exhaled slowly, trying to push down the fury boiling inside him. He had spent 4 years believing she had abandoned them, and now he had to reframe everything he thought he knew. A buzzing noise interrupted them. His phone. He glanced at the screen, his security team was already responding. He answered immediately. "Tell me you have something." His head of security, David Foster, spoke in his usual no-nonsense tone. The number is a burner, but we're tracking the last known location. It was pinged near Claire's old apartment 2 nights ago. Anthony's grip on the phone tightened. Keep looking. I want names. And I want them fast. Understood, David said before the call disconnected. Claire was watching him carefully. What now? Anthony set his phone down. Now, you and Lily stay here. I'm increasing security. No one comes in or out without my approval. Claire hesitated. Anthony. I'm not risking either of you, he interrupted, his voice firm. They want to find you. Fine. Let them try. But they won't get anywhere near you. For the first time since she had walked back into his life, something in Claire's posture relaxed slightly. It wasn't full trust, not yet, but it was something. Anthony wasn't just handling this as a businessman. He was handling this as a father. And as far as he was concerned, whoever had tried to take away the last 4 years of his daughter's life had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. The house felt different now. Claire's presence changed everything. It wasn't just the added tension, the unspoken words still lingering between them, or the quiet looks she exchanged with Lily when she thought Anthony wasn't watching. It was the shift in him. He had spent 4 years building a life that didn't include her, convincing himself that she was gone, that she didn't deserve a place in his world after the way she had left. And now, all of that had been ripped apart by the truth. He paced his office, phone in hand, waiting for an update from his security team. Every fiber of his being screamed for action, for control, for something tangible to direct his anger toward. He had spent years learning how to eliminate risks, how to predict and outmaneuver threats before they ever reached him. But this wasn't a hostile takeover or a corporate war. This was personal. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. Claire stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching him carefully. Her expression was unreadable, but there was something in her eyes, something he hadn't seen in years. A quiet determination, mixed with hesitation. You're going to drive yourself crazy if you keep pacing like that, she said softly. Anthony exhaled sharply, shoving his phone into his pocket. I don't have time to sit around and wait. Claire stepped inside, closing the door behind her. You think I don't understand that? She met his gaze, unwavering. I've spent years looking over my shoulder, wondering if I was still being followed. Wondering if the next time I walked into a store, someone would be watching. Wondering if I had made a mistake by leaving. His jaw tightened. You did. She flinched, but didn't look away. I know. Her voice was quiet, but firm. I know I should have told you. I know I should have trusted you. But, Anthony, I had just given birth. I was terrified, and every instinct in me told me that staying would put you both in danger. He wanted to stay angry. It was easier than the alternative. I spent 4 years thinking you walked away because you didn't want us, he said, his voice colder than he intended. Do you have any idea what that did to me? Claire swallowed hard. And do you have any idea what it did to me to leave my daughter behind? The silence between them was suffocating. Finally, she sighed, rubbing her hands over her face. I didn't come back expecting forgiveness. I didn't expect anything. But I knew that if something happened to me, Lily needed to be with you. His stomach twisted at the thought. Nothing is going to happen to you. You don't know that. He took a step forward, his blue eyes dark with intensity. Yes, I do. Because I won't let it. Claire held his gaze, searching for something in his expression. Whatever she found made her exhale shakily, her posture softening just slightly. A knock at the door interrupted them. Anthony turned, already reaching for his phone, but before he could check the screen, David's voice came through the speaker. We found something. Anthony's entire body went rigid. What? The number used to send the threats was traced to a location about 30 miles from here. It's an old warehouse, but there's activity. Recent surveillance footage shows movement inside. Anthony's grip on his phone tightened. Send me the address. Claire stepped forward, alarm flashing in her eyes. What are you going to do? He met her gaze. End this. She shook her head. Anthony, this isn't just another business problem you can throw money at. These people are dangerous. I know exactly what they are, he said, his voice low, controlled. And they made a mistake thinking they could come after you and my daughter. Claire hesitated, as if debating whether to argue, but then she exhaled, her shoulders sagging slightly. Be careful. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was something. And right now, that was enough. The drive to the warehouse was quiet, but Anthony's mind was anything but. Every muscle in his body was tense, his hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary as he processed what was about to happen. The address David had sent him was an abandoned industrial building on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place people went when they didn't want to be found. He had spent years dealing with high-stakes business negotiations, maneuvering through ruthless boardrooms where power dictated every move. But this wasn't business. This was personal. He wasn't thinking about contracts or investments. He was thinking about Claire. About Lily. About the 4 years that had been stolen from him, the time he could never get back. He was thinking about the threats that had followed Claire, the fear she had lived with, the weight she had carried alone. He was thinking about the fact that someone had tried to take them from him. And that was a mistake he wasn't going to let them make again. As he pulled onto the desolate road leading to the warehouse, his phone buzzed. He pressed a button on the dashboard, answering the call without taking his eyes off the road. We're in position, David's voice came through, calm and professional as always. No sign of anyone entering or leaving in the last hour. The place isn't abandoned, though, security cameras are active, and we've spotted movement on the second floor. Anthony exhaled, nodding slightly. How many? Hard to say. At least 2 inside, maybe more. Anthony's jaw tightened. No mistakes. I want them alive. I want to know why this started and why it's still happening. David didn't hesitate. Understood. Anthony ended the call as he pulled the car to a stop a few blocks away. He stepped out, adjusting the cuffs of his sleeves as he surveyed the darkened structure ahead. The air was thick with tension, the silence of the empty streets pressing against him. He had spent his life controlling every aspect of his world, ensuring that nothing happened without his approval. This was one of the few times in his life where control had been taken from him. And he was about to take it back. David and 2 of his men met him near the side entrance. They were dressed in dark tactical gear, their weapons concealed but ready. David handed him an earpiece, and Anthony placed it in his ear without a word. Main entrance is locked, David said quietly, nodding toward the side of the building. But there's an access point through the back. No alarms detected. Anthony nodded once. Then let's go. The air inside the warehouse was stale, filled with the scent of dust and rusted metal. The faint hum of machinery somewhere in the distance echoed through the vast space. The ground floor was mostly empty, abandoned equipment scattered across the concrete floor, but the real activity was upstairs. Anthony's heartbeat remained steady as he moved forward, his steps soundless. He had been in high-pressure situations before, had made decisions that carried consequences, but this was different. He wasn't just protecting an investment or securing a deal. He was protecting his family. They reached the staircase leading to the second floor, and David signaled for his men to move first. Anthony followed closely, his pulse thrumming as they ascended. At the top of the stairs, the hallway split into 2 directions. A faint light flickered from one of the rooms ahead. David signaled, then moved. The door burst open in a swift motion, and the next moments unfolded in rapid succession. Raised voices. The shuffling of movement. The sound of a chair scraping against the floor. Anthony stepped inside, his gaze locking onto the man sitting in the center of the room. He was middle-aged, unremarkable in appearance, with a calmness that was far too controlled for someone who had just been cornered. A second man stood by the window, his posture tense, but he didn't reach for a weapon. David's men moved quickly, securing the area, making sure no one else was present. Anthony took a slow step forward, his blue eyes cold and unreadable. "Who sent you?" The man in the chair exhaled through his nose, shaking his head slightly. "You already know the answer to that." Anthony tilted his head slightly, studying him. "I want to hear you say it." The man smirked. "You think money makes you untouchable, Grayson? You think because you built yourself an empire, no one would ever dare come after you?" Anthony's expression didn't change. "You went after the wrong people." The man's smirk widened slightly. "That's where you're wrong." Anthony moved faster than the man could react, grabbing him by the front of his shirt and pulling him forward. The chair scraped loudly against the floor as Anthony leaned down, his voice low and deadly. "Who hired you?" The man's smirk faltered, but his gaze remained steady. "You're smart. Figure it out." Anthony's fingers tightened, his patience wearing thin. He had spent 4 years believing Claire had abandoned them, had convinced himself she had walked away out of selfishness. Now he knew the truth. Now he knew there were people who had wanted her gone, who had forced her into hiding. He wasn't leaving this room without answers. David stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "We'll get what we need from him." Anthony held the man's gaze for a moment longer before releasing him abruptly. The man coughed, adjusting his shirt, but he didn't look away. Anthony straightened, rolling his shoulders back. "Make sure he understands something." David nodded. "What's that?" Anthony's voice was ice. "If anything happens to Claire or Lily again, there won't be a conversation next time." The man's smirk was gone now. "Good." Anthony turned on his heel and walked out of the room, his heartbeat steady, his mind already moving toward what needed to be done next. He had spent years believing he was alone in protecting Lily. Now he knew the truth. And now, he was going to make sure no one ever threatened his family again. Anthony didn't go home right away. He needed time to clear his head, to make sure everything was handled before he faced Claire and Lily again. The warehouse was secured, the men responsible taken care of, and his security team was already working to uncover who had been pulling the strings behind the threats. But the anger still burned in his chest, the weight of 4 lost years pressing heavily against him. He sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel, watching the city lights blur through the windshield. For so long, he had believed that Claire had made a choice to leave, that she had walked away because she didn't want to stay, because she hadn't wanted them. That belief had shaped everything, his cold detachment, the way he had shut off every part of himself that had once been vulnerable. He had convinced himself that Lily didn't need to know the truth, that he had done the right thing by keeping her safe from a mother who had never wanted her. But that had been a lie. Claire had run to protect them. She had lived in fear for years, carrying the burden alone, making the impossible choice to leave her own child behind because she thought it was the only way to keep her safe. And now, after everything, she had come back, not because she wanted forgiveness, but because she had no other choice. Anthony let out a slow breath before finally turning the key in the ignition. It was time to go home. When he stepped inside the house, it was quiet. The weight of the night settled over him as he walked through the living room, loosening the tie he hadn't even realized he was still wearing. He expected Claire to be waiting for him, demanding answers, demanding to know what he had done, but instead, he found Lily first. She was curled up on the couch, a small book resting against her chest, her tiny body rising and falling in steady breaths. She must have fallen asleep waiting for him. Anthony crouched down beside her, brushing a loose strand of dark hair from her face. She didn't stir, completely lost in sleep, her expression peaceful in a way that made something deep inside him tighten. For 4 years, He had done everything to make sure she never felt the loss of what she didn't have. He had made sure she never felt unwanted, never felt alone. But had he been wrong to keep the truth from her? Had he been wrong to assume that protecting her meant keeping her in the dark? A soft sound from the hallway caught his attention. He looked up to see Claire standing near the doorway, arms wrapped around herself, watching them. "You're back," she said quietly. He stood slowly, meeting her gaze. "It's done." She nodded, though he could tell there were still questions lingering in her mind. "Did you find out who was behind it?" Anthony exhaled. "Not yet. But I will." Claire hesitated, then took a cautious step forward. "Is it over?" He studied her for a moment before answering. "For now." She nodded again, but he could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the weight of everything pressing down on her. She had spent years living in fear, and now that fear had followed her back here. "You don't have to be afraid anymore," he said, his voice quieter than before. "You're not alone in this." She let out a breath, something unspoken passing between them. "Neither are you." He wasn't sure when the shift had happened, when the anger had started to fade, when the wall he had built around himself had begun to crack. Maybe it had been when he saw the look on her face when she first saw Lily, the way she had barely been able to breathe. Maybe it had been when he realized that she had been just as much of a victim as he had been. Maybe it had been the moment he understood that protecting Lily didn't just mean keeping her safe. It meant giving her both of her parents. Claire glanced down at Lily, her expression softening. "She looks just like you." Anthony smirked slightly. "She has your stubbornness." A small laugh escaped her lips, quiet but real. It was the first time he had heard it in years, and for a moment, they weren't two people standing on opposite sides of a broken past. They were just them again. He didn't know what happened next. He didn't know if he could ever fully forgive her, if they could ever go back to what they had been before. But as he stood there, watching Claire kneel down beside their daughter, gently running her fingers through her hair with the kind of tenderness only a mother could have, he realized something. They didn't have to go back. They just had to move forward. Together. The ending of this story is not about neatly tying up the past or pretending that 4 years of absence can be erased overnight. It's about something far more real, the slow, difficult journey of rebuilding trust, of choosing to move forward despite everything that was lost. Anthony spent years believing Claire had abandoned them, carrying the weight of anger and responsibility on his own shoulders. His life was structured, controlled, and built around the idea that he was the only one Lily needed. But the truth shattered that illusion. Claire hadn't left because she wanted to, she had left because she thought it was the only way to keep them safe. That realization didn't instantly fix everything. Anthony wasn't a man who forgave easily, and Claire wasn't expecting him to. But what makes this ending powerful is that it isn't about forgiveness alone, it's about understanding. It's about two people who were forced apart by circumstances beyond their control, now standing at a crossroads, faced with the choice of whether to rebuild or walk away again. Lily is the anchor in all of this. She is the proof that their connection was never truly severed, the reason they are both willing to try. The moment Claire kneels beside their daughter, touching her hair with the love of a mother who never stopped caring, is the moment Anthony realizes that moving forward doesn't mean forgetting the past, it means choosing to build something new. This story isn't about erasing pain. It's about healing. It's about learning to trust again, even when it's terrifying. It's about a family that was broken but not beyond repair. And that's what makes the ending so powerful, not because it's perfect, but because it's real.